Welcome to the Humans of Hospitality podcast. I know so many of you listening to this show love your local bar, your local restaurant, maybe your local hotel, and have so many fond memories of time in hospitality businesses. This is the podcast where we get to chat to the human beings behind the scenes of that industry. Maybe the chefs or the bakers or the coffee roasters or the gin distillers or the craft brewers or the entrepreneurs, but all doing an amazing job of making sure that hospitality stays interesting and the big, dull, formulaic brands do not take over our high street. Please enjoy the show. In this week's conversation, we are chatting to Simon Tolson, and it's very fair to say that he has had his fair share of highs and lows to get to where he is now as a human of hospitality. An early high point was his first paid day as a fisherman. Since the age of 3, he'd wanted to fish, and he literally felt like an astronaut when he stepped onto the deck of a fishing vessel. But several years later, now married and with a mortgage, he had to switch careers, and he left the sea for a surprisingly different job, selling printers and photocopiers for Pitney Bowes. Now, that did surprisingly lead to a new high, because the sales skills that he was trained in and developed not only worked for office equipment, but they came in very handy when he turned his attention to holiday homes. And it was the early noughties, and there were generous tax breaks if you were renovating a property such as a holiday let. So Simon and a colleague began to build a new business offering holiday homes as promising investments. So far so good, but then the financial crash, and in 2007, everything changed. In this program, you're going to hear how Simon worked his way out of the prolonged low that followed, and how, despite challenging odds, he's now the proud owner of Rumsey Holiday Homes, and he's got beautiful views over the sea, and even gets the occasional chance to fish. I very much hope you enjoy the roller coaster of this week's conversation. Okay, Simon Tolson, thank you so much for sparing the time to be on the podcast. Very much appreciated.
Okay, nice to be here, Mark. Thanks for the invite.
No, can you just explain where in the world are we and why?
So here we are. We're in a fabulous property overlooking Poole Harbour, just by the Sandbanks Peninsula. And it's one of the properties we manage because I own Rumsey of Sandbanks, which is the brand name, Rumsey Holiday Homes, as people may know it, which for decades is part of the Rumsey and Rumsey empire, which is all now gone, and we're the last vestige of that business.
Nice, excellent. And literally, we are overlooking Brownsea Island, aren't we? Otherwise, I'm going to do my sad local knowledge. Second largest natural harbour in the world, and all that jazz. But Sandbanks, fundamentally known as a kind of, I don't know, the playground for the football stars and stuff like that. Has it still got that reputation, or has that eased off a little bit in the last couple of years? It was known as the third most expensive real estate in the world, I think, wasn't it?
It was. I always thought that was a bit of a cheat, because it's not actually a place, because it's Poole, and it's a bit like if you took a square in Belgravia, you could call it the most expensive place in the world, or how narrow do you do that? It does still have that reputation a bit. It actually really isn't like that. There's most of the property on Sandbanks is relatively modest, actually. There's only about 15 or 20 super homes, and the rest are actually quite modest flats, and there's still a lot of the original bungalows, and a lot of people that have owned places for decades that they bought for what seems now like the price of a car.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
that's typical.
Okay. Well, we'll come back to Sandbanks when we get to what you're doing now. But I love to kind of learn the triggers and the history of people and how they've ended up doing what they're doing. You've really been a man of 3 careers, and it started with fish, fundamentally, and hospitality-wise, I think. And can you just tell us a little bit about your fishing background?
Yes, well, I've no explanation, because it's not in my family, but ever since I can remember, since I was 3 or 4 years old, I just loved fishing. And this was a big distraction through my somewhat checkered academic career. So while I was busy failing A-levels and then eventually scraping into a course in fishery science at Plymouth Polytechnic, as it was then, all the time, all I really wanted to do was go fishing, which I just daren't do. And eventually, one day I just sat down and thought, I just don't want to do this anymore. And much to the chagrin of my parents, I just packed it in and got a job working on a fishing boat, which for me was like being an astronaut. It was all I wanted to do. And every day when I got up, I felt, like it was a privilege to get up, So was
that a day boat?
Yeah, it was a day boat. I never worked in. So, and one of the first things I did, the first winter I was full-time fisherman, we took the boat to Cornwall, and that's where the connection with Cornwall, which comes up later, comes. So we spent the winter fishing on mackerel in Cornwall with hand lines, or hurdy-gurdies as they're known, and that was my connection there. And I kept going back, and then I came back to Poole, and worked for 5 or 6 years on crabs and lobsters out of Poole.
Okay, nice. And you did a degree in, what was it, fishing before this? Did you? Did that help? Does that help you catch fish? You must have been the only academic on the trawler, surely.
Yes, that's right. No, I did 2.5 terms of a degree in fishery science, which is actually, it sounds daft, it's actually a serious degree because it produces people in aquaculture to farm fish and trout, and it produces technicians for the fishing gear industry. So there was a lot of technical stuff about trawl. It was very interesting. However, every day I didn't want to study. I just wanted to go fishing, which happened quite a lot. And hence I had to agree that it wasn't for me quite quickly. Yeah.
Nice. Never gone back and finished that?
No, and I don't. And I think I'd be kidding myself if I thought I could sit down for more than 20 minutes without rushing from a classroom in horror.
So you went from catching the fish to setting up a business, Shiny Eyed Fish. How did that come about? What did it do?
I still think it's a great name because it describes it. No one else ever does. But well, whilst working on a fishing boat means you actually work probably less than 50% of the time, because there's stages of the tide you can't work, and then when there's weather you can't work. And you're paid a share, so basically you kind of starve to death a lot of the time.
It's a great sales pitch there for a fisherman.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't. It was also phenomenally dangerous at the time as well, but it's what you do when you were young, so that was it. But so during the spare time to try and make a few quid, what I decided is I would sell fish to restaurants, and it was fantastic because Greenslades, who are still in Poole today, and the same guys are still there. Bless them, the same guys were there. They had the retail price, they had the restaurant price, and they actually would give vendors a price 10% below the restaurant. So because they, in a sort of strange old tech way, they understood that if they gave a bit of margin to people who went out and promoted their goods, then that couldn't be undercut by the restaurateurs going straight to them, then it would, they'd make more money, I presume. But also they were just like really nice guys who supported the industry. And so I'd go down first thing in the morning. I knew all the guys. I'd pick whatever was best for the day. I'd put it in my battered van and I'd drive it round the restaurants dressed up as a fisherman in comedy oilskins and flog it to the chefs.
Right.
And that was a real education because some restaurants, the chefs were massively enthusiastic and the whole kitchen crew would run out and swoon over whatever was good that day. And someone would say, well, why should I bother? I can get it frozen, portioned, without. Yeah. And the correlation between the attitudes and the expense of the restaurant was not the same. Some cheaper independent places were enthusiastic, and some major high-end hotels and restaurants were of the, I can't be bothered to buy fresh. So it was a good education, and it was really a sideline. And my intention was to start it up full time, but I ended up deciding that I'd go and work in sales for a food company to get a network and so I got an interview with a frozen food company, which didn't work out because it was cheap. Well, they didn't want me, but then the recruitment agent I'd gone through persuaded me to go for another sales job. So I ended up selling office equipment,
Wow.
which was because I needed to pay. By this time, I'd got married and bought a house, so I had to pay the mortgage.
Yeah, that's what happens sometimes. I think so. You'd gone from wild trawler fisherman to fish seller pretending to be a fisherman to selling photocopiers.
Yes.
What was the time frame?
Mainly equipment, and that was over. There was about 5 or 6 years at sea,
Okay.
And then I entered the frontline sales commission based world of selling with Pitney Bowes, who are famous for training their people. Pitney Bowes and Xerox were the two places then where you went to get as it were, an education if you were going to be a salesman. And they had massive recruitment days, and it was just above the sort of pyramid selling level. It was a genuine actual job with a car and a small salary, but basically it was sell or starve. So.
Yeah. But they actually teach you the technique of selling, not just get out there and sell, Simon, but this is how to do it.
Yes.
Because that's a great skill to get.
The training was literally life-changing. Yeah. They sent you off for a couple of weeks somewhere, and you came back with this superpower, and when it worked, like, you couldn't believe it would work. And they teach this like stuff, the most basic things, the alternative close. Don't ask for yes or no, ask for one thing or the other. And the first time you sat down, you'd say, would you like your slogan printed in red or blue? And the guy'd say, blue. And you were like, oh my God, it worked. Yeah. And you'd say, okay, well, if I could throw the slogan in with it, would you go ahead today? And he'd say, well, yeah, okay. And it was like, you never believed it that it could happen, but the most basic things. And actually, through my life, those first two, I've been on many, many, many courses and training and increased, but nothing's had the impact of that first fortnight of basic skills. Yeah.
So do you still use some of those skills now then? Have they sort of stayed with you for life? Or?
Every single day of my life.
Really?
Always on the phone.
Yeah.
If I could do that weekend for 500 quid, will you book right now with your card? Yes. Maybe. Would you rather have the one with 2 parking spaces or the sea view? It's every day of my life I still use those.
It's funny, I think, isn't it, how we pick up these skills through life and almost subconsciously use them. But I always love it if some of my team sometimes have gone off and worked for a big corporate. Quite often, as long as they're not there too long, I'll get quite excited because they'll teach you some stuff and you'll come back with it. And then if you can put it back into that more independent creative sector, they're great skills. Because I'm guessing you prefer selling holiday homes to
to selling office equipment. We used to sell folding and inserting machines that kind of didn't really work, but we were such a well-trained team that somehow we were able to overcome this like minor inconvenience. And of course, there was no social media for people to post that it didn't work. So you could do it then.
Yeah, excellent. So how does that end up then? Because the next big hospitality chunk was fundamentally holiday homes in Cornwall, I think. Is that right? So how do you go from...
That's right. Well,
how do you make that leap?
What happened was in the middle was a bit of property business and being a financial advisor. I forgot to mention that bit.
Right. Okay. That's also handy. Numbers come up a lot in life.
Yes, that's right. Well, the sales path went up. We had a very happy accident because it was the start of the tech boom, and there was software to be sold and for big numbers, and none of the people who could do the software could sell stuff. So nowadays it's the same person. So what they did is they recruited barrow boys like us, basically, to go with the technical people, and so there was suddenly a big demand for people that could sell stuff. And could understand the basics of software, and I've always been a bit of a keen techie, to go and sell software for people. And so accidentally we ended up getting higher and higher salaries, and one person would go and he'd ring all his mates and say, over here we're selling. So I ended up selling some sort of niche but highly expensive software to developers. And so I bought a holiday home in Cornwall, which I'd always wanted and thought, okay, if I could buy it. And it was a very modest one. And 2 things happened. First of all, I rang up the agency and I said, okay, I'd like to put my holiday home with you. And they said, oh, be commissioned between us. I said, oh, great. And I said, oh, and how much is the cleaning and the caretaking? And they said, well, oh, no, we don't do that. That's down to you to organise. And I said, and when do you answer the phone, like, for the guests? They said, oh, no. We're a holiday agency. What we do is we rent the property and then you're on your own. It's up to you. Go and find. We can give you a few names. You've got to find someone to answer the phone. If the guests need anything, welcome them, get the place set up. And I, frankly, couldn't believe this. And they wanted about a quarter of the rent to do that. But that was how the industry was then, because the internet was in its infancy. And so to get bookings, you had to send out thousands of huge brochures. You had to answer the phones with banks of people. In fact, with hindsight, I wonder anything got done. So that was the first bit, and so I kind of gave it a go. But I thought, because I could do a few things with software, I thought, well, I might as well do it myself, which I did. And the second thing that happened was at the end of the first year, my accountant, I sat down with the accountant, and he said, okay, you do realise that all this work you've done, you can offset the losses because it's a business. This has changed now, but at the time you can offset that against any income you've got. So that 30,000 you spent doing up that property, we can offset that against your salary and bonus that you're earning, and you'll get a 12 grand refund from the revenue in form of a cheque. And I said, excuse me, run that by me again. And so he said, no, it's a business. You can offset the loss against any income you've made in the last 3 years. And because you're a 40% taxpayer, you'll get 40% of it back. He said, oh, and by the way, because it's a business, when you sell it, you'll only pay 10% capital gain out. So I said, just get me straight again. Even if I don't make any money, if I spend 50 and it goes up by 50, I'll get 40% of the 50 back, and then I'll only pay 10% of the 50 in the gain on the way out. And this completely blew my mind, and frankly...
Quite handy accountants sometimes, aren't they?
Well, they only said it in a retrospective, casual way, and for me it was
presume everybody knows it.
Well, for me, the opportunity then was immediately, there's this massive opportunity, property was booming, and so it did my head in, frankly, and I almost couldn't go to work because it was just brilliant. And so I decided, okay, a very good friend of mine, who was my best man, runs a big financial services agency in Poole, and I decided, okay, what if we form a partnership? And what I'll do is, he's got people coming in with a happy problem, a city bonus, they've sold a company, they've inherited me, for whatever, they've got a happy money problem, preferably one they've earned because they paid the tax on it. And when they go around the departments and pension and investment, I'll have a department that says, okay, why don't you take some of that and we'll go and buy a house in Cornwall for you. We'll receive you, we'll do it all up, and you'll get 40% of what you spend on it back. You'll have exposure to residential in your portfolio, and it's something you can enjoy using. And it was extremely successful because people would say, oh, well, that sounds quite interesting.
It's a pretty good pitch, to be fair. You're right, you are good at that sales. I was practically getting my wallet out then.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, that sounds better. And then I had an even more genius idea, because I said, okay, well, what we'll do, I'm not actually going to charge anything for doing all this, but what we'll do is we'll value the house when we buy it, we'll work out the expenses in, and then in 2 years' time, we'll value it when we sell it, and we'll take 30% of the upside, and you keep 70%. So you keep 70, and we get 30, and I'll manage it in the meantime that goes in. And better than that 30% we'll charge it as a fee. You can offset it against your tax, so you'll actually get 12% of it back. So you'll only pay 18%, so you'll get 82%, I'll get 18%. Does that sound like a deal?
Upside only.
Genius, upside only. You'll probably spotting the flaw here, thinking of the subsequent history in this business plan. Okay.
Well, the property doesn't always go up. Is that the one?
Yeah, understatement of the century. And so we did about 15 or 20 of these, and because I didn't want to trust that asset and my client's assets and my asset, we did all the marketing and the caretaking and the looking after guests and the looking after owners. I set up and did it ourselves, and it was actually a sort of a cost. We did charge them, but with the staff and the scale of it, it actually lost a little bit of money, but that was fine. It was part of running the business. And then 2008-9, we all get up one morning, and Northern Rock people are battering the doors down, and overnight everything changes. So I'd also, like many people did at the time, I'd bought a whole bunch of properties myself, and the income from them didn't cover the mortgage payments, but that didn't matter because they were going up much faster than the interest payments, so what could possibly go wrong? And so almost literally overnight, we found ourselves, instead of looking forward at a position on a dozen properties of supreme profit and retirement, it was basically wiped out overnight. And on top of that, my property portfolio, I had to sell them all because we were underwater on just about on it. And so we ended up struggling on. And then 3 months later in the budget, Gordon Brown announced that because there had to be harmonisation after the EU, you'd no longer be allowed to offset income losses against other income for holiday properties.
Wow, that was a tough 3 months.
And so the entire business, everything was completely evaporated in a 3 or 6 month period. And this is where I have one of those sliding doors moments where I'm putting it in. So I hung on to my own house. I rented it out. I had a pretty large house. So I rented it out. I moved into a modest, smaller house. And I said, okay, I'm going to have to go back to work and we'll tidy things up. And I went for I called round all my network, went to my mates. I got hold of somebody who was managing and that I'd done well for when I was there. And I got an interview with a company that sold call centres, like complete solutions, big business. We're going to set up a 100-person call centre, 200, multi-million pound deals, big salary, but bonuses, everything. Okay, I can work my way out of it. And I went up there, and the guy who was the top one on our team was one of the guys I'd worked with that I'd actually beaten 1 year before. So I got recommendations, all good. And they said, brilliant, you can start straight away. But we're an American company, you've just got to go to human resources and check that you're a fit with the company. And at the moment, I'm in the most hyped up, hyper sales mode you can get into at this point. So they send me down to human resources, and genuinely, there's a young lady, and if I go back now, I'll thank her, called Felicity, who's 24, who starts asking me lots of what kind of animal would you be if you were, how would your friends describe you, and all this kind of test. And in the end, they said, okay, can you tell me about your best moment? Went through. And I said, well, we had this great month where I could win a holiday to safari, which I really wanted to go on, Zimbabwe, Botswana. And there was a month to go. But to get there, I'd have to put in like the biggest month that anyone basically had ever put in. But I worked through, and at the end of it, I got over the line and I won this holiday that we really wanted to go. My friend was great. And she said, well, can you explain how you did that? And I said, well, sometimes you see an interview with a serial killer and they come round in the flat and it's covered in bodies and they've no idea what happened, but that's where they were. I said, it was a bit like that. Yeah. And she looked at me and she said, well, thanks very much for being in touch. Yeah. And on the way home down the motorway, my phone rang and they said, I'm really sorry, we wanted you, but HR said you're not a cultural fit
Wow.
for the company.
Okay.
And
They
I'd
don't like serial killer analogies.
and I'd thrown away like a spectacular opportunity.
Right. We're still pretty much in the same 3 months, so we're into month 4
well, this
now.
is within about 6 months.
Okay, so you're definitely on a run then.
So I'm on a roll with one. So I went home and I started looking into other things I could do and did a bit of consultancy and a bit of training. But in the meantime, we had these 25 properties I had to keep running. And so...
Why did you have to keep those ones?
Because we still had the 20 properties belonging to the clients,
right.
which were holiday lets in Cornwall,
yeah.
which were in one village where we put everything together. And that business was running, but I was paying people to run it.
Because you didn't get your money until exit.
Exactly, yes. So it went through. But we made, we got the normal commission and bits and pieces, but it was just because it was all staffed. So what I said, I had a PA at the time who'd been with me for many years. So we said, well, all right, well, why don't we run it? Because at least we'll have a little bit of income. We'll run it. We'll take the phone calls. We'll do that. Looks like we've got a holiday agency now. And I'll go down to Cornwall 2 days a week and I'll try and add, because other people had asked, to join us who weren't part of the portfolio. And we'll see if we can, in the meantime, maybe we can make it into something we can offload for a few quid or make a few quid whilst we work out what to do. And from there, it went from 20 to 25 to 30 to...
This is people just coming to you to act
so
as an agent.
So we decided then to advertise and because, at the time it seems obvious, at the time what was innovative was we were one-stop shop. So at the time, almost no agencies would do the cleaning or the caretaking, which frankly is the hard bit. Yeah. And so we advertised saying, one-stop shop, just let us have your property, come on holiday, and we'll take care of everything. You don't have to worry about it. We'll organise the plumbers. We'll answer the phone to the. So we answered the phone 24 hours a day, and we did all that. This is remotely from Poole, with staff on the ground in Cornwall, and sort of eventually it turned into a job, and we added, and gradually it grew until then we got on a roll, and we had 60 or 70 places, and then we got a small office there, and then someone who had an agency with 20 in the village wanted to retire, so I bought that and added it in, and then which gave us even more, and it snowballed on for a few years until we got up to about, I bought another little agency and we added some more to about 160 or 70 properties, which is a proper...
What was the time frame going from 20
business?
to...
And that was about a 4-year time frame.
Okay. And in this period, you're going down to Cornwall every week?
What I do is get up every Monday morning at 4:30, leave at 5, arrive at 8:30 at the office in Cornwall, and then I'd stay in one of the properties for 2 nights or 3 nights and come back. And when when it was busy and we were full, I slept on a camp bed in the office literally next to my desk or under my desk.
Any reason why you didn't move there? Because you were quite committed by this point, presumably.
I was, but and that was always kind of a plan. And but my parents live here. My wife's parents, well, Dad's dead now, but my wife's mum lives here. My kids are at school here.
Okay.
I always lived here. And so it was, maybe when the kids leave school, there was always like 2 years next year or 2 years time.
Maybe next year.
Yeah. And maybe we'd have gone down that route until another of those sliding doors moments arrived.
This is how you ended up in Poole. Before we go there, what were you doing then were you having to try and add value to compete? Because there are a lot of holiday lets in Cornwall. There's also lots of hotels and B&Bs. How do you make somebody's trip special? How do you make a family want to go to Cornwall and stay in one of your properties?
Yeah, crucial. So first of all, what we did was focused in on one area where people wanted to go. And what you find is whoever's got the most choice wins, because if you've got to if you want to go to a town and you've got to look across 10 different websites. It's kind of irritating, which is where booking.com and all those aggregators start to win. So you try and make yourself the destination, the website destination of choice, which is the first thing. The second thing was we took it to a bit more extremes, was the great principle. The key of the whole thing often is the first 5 minutes principle. And it comes from Mr. Marriott. When I was a salesman, I used to go around everywhere. I quite often stayed in a Marriott, and it's a bit like the Gideon Bible. One day I went there and there was a book in there by Mr. Marriott about Marriott hotels. So I read it and I was sitting there. And his key thing in a Marriott, and I didn't realise this, first 5 minutes is crucial. So if you go into a Marriott, and I'm sure it's the same now, and there's like 10 people queuing to check in, there's a sort of emergency button they press under the desk, and it sounds out. People from around the hotel come rushing down to reception, and they'll take you. They'll say, come and sit down. I'll go and get you a coffee, and don't worry, I'll check you in when it's ready, because there's a bit of a queue, but we'll get you there. And suddenly the chandelier sparkles, the music becomes more pleasant. That's the nicest coffee you've ever been. Oh man! And when you get to your room, what a great room! There's plenty of space, and I like a car park view. It's more realistic with your mindset is changed, and glass half full, glass half empty is the critical thing with food, with taste. When you taste a meal, a beer, a glass of wine, if someone's told you that it's brilliant, then it is. And the same principle applied. So we made sure people arrived. We made sure that when they arrived in, there was fresh scones, jam, cream, a bottle of wine, some fresh flowers. The heating was on, the lights were on, because many of our places were glass half full or glass half empty. They were old buildings. They were in the face of the sea. They'd have damp and crumbly bits. Some of them weren't super swish, they were a bit traditional, but if you got the guest into the right mindset, and I'm an expert in glass half full because everything is half full to me, and my wife, I'm sure she wouldn't mind me saying, is slightly the opposite. And so as I would put it, not only is the glass half empty, it's the wrong sort of water and I'm not thirsty. But that's how it worked out, and that was the key. And then we really personally, we hired, like a bar with the staff, like the staff at Jenkins, like everything else, we hired people that liked people, to make sure they were looked after. They didn't need any skill other than just to be one of us,
Yeah, no, it's perfect. I think that's where the link is, really, isn't it? We're all in the people industry, basically. Anything, food, drink, accommodation, all the way through hospitality. It's why it's called the humans of hospitality. It's the human beings that make the difference, I think, isn't it? And it worked then. So you were predominantly getting word of mouth kind of recommendations. Yeah. That was the difference. Because by the time people are there, I guess, you could argue you've got your money, they leave in a week, and then you go on to the new customer. But you were very much around a referral kind of concept.
No, the key is a lot of this business, because especially if Cornwall, you don't know it, people go back to their workplace and their families and bang on and on about the holiday they had, and there was fresh flowers, and there was, the sea view, and and then when someone else wants to go in a big workplace, especially, someone's going in, you start searching for cottage in Cornwall, like you don't even know north from south from whatever. So you'll always speak to the person, and we'd get clusters we'd see loads of bookings with emails from like Leicester County Council or something. And you could see, amazing. You could see the clusters of word of mouth. Yes, the impact there. And the other thing we did was we were early in the search engine optimization when it used to be easy. Right. And we were all over it, building pages for every phrase imaginable. And we built literally thousands of pages on the site. So
because you understood it, because you were a
yes.
bit techie.
Exactly.
Do you think people's expectations have changed? Because is it still as easy as turn the heating on, put the flowers in, or have people's expectations become more demanding in the last few years?
Actually, they've become a little more demanding in terms of putting up with a green bathroom or a stuffy sofa, but not that much. In the end, the heating on, the cleanliness is obviously like before 101, before we even start any conversation anywhere has got to be spotless, because someone turning up to even anything remotely not clean enough is a massive no-no. So that's the first thing.
Which is hard in old properties in Cornwall.
It is,
isn't it?
yes.
Traditional properties are harder to keep clean than the new. The one we're sat in now is immaculate, with its huge white tiles and buttons that control the curtains, and everything's immaculate. But I imagine, and we'll come to the sandbanks one soon. But yeah, I imagine that's harder to achieve in Cornwall.
Yes, it is, and the key point here, and battling with the owner, you have to pay to get it done, and it's expensive. And I've constantly been having a conversation with owners. With the linen and the changeover and the stuff going in, it might be 100 or 120 quid for a changeover. And they'd say, but I pay my lady £40 and she cleans my, 6-bedroom house in. And you'd say, yeah, but do you pay her national insurance and her pension? Yeah. Do you pay her? Do you give her holiday pay? Do you do the supervision? Yes. And he said, what linen? You do understand that like a 3-bedroom house, that's like, 8 loads of washing with all the towels. There's a disconnect between the value people put on that and what it costs. Because I've been on the other end, and believe me, it's hard to make a living out of providing, labour at even 12 or 15 quid an hour now is really difficult. But on the other end, people who are making many thousands perceive that as being not too expensive.
Absolutely. So compared to a Marriott, you're fundamentally dealing with other people's residences as well, where I guess sometimes they're going to live in them, or maybe they've just moved out for the summer because they want to get some rental income. So you've got a very different beast to the traditional hospitality industry, I guess. Does dealing with the actual owners create its own set of challenges?
It certainly does. And also it's taken me years to get to grips with the key is to understand what the owner wants, because we have a hugely different base of owners. Some have got a number of unusual. It was very unusual for them to have a portfolio of properties, and they'd say, "Look, it's an investment. I just want income." Very, very few are owners like that.
Really, a shame. They must be your dream owners, are they?
No, quite the opposite.
Oh, really?
In fact, I almost, it's not the sort of owner we make a living looking after people's loved holiday homes.
Okay.
Who for different reasons want to let it out. Of which getting the income is only a part of it. It's also having the place looked after, having it,
because they look after them better. If it's
well, we'll come on to this with sandbanks especially. But if you have when I first had a second home, I didn't let it out because I didn't need to, and when we'd go down, it would have been empty because I know we're going to go every 2 or 3 weeks or month, but in fact, before you know it, it's 10 weeks since you've been, or 12, and so you're turning up to places been locked up for 12 weeks, and you weren't there to turn the heating on when it got a bit colder and it's dank and musty, so you've got to sort it out when you turn up late. And then my wife would kick us all out of bed on a Sunday morning and say, "Well, I want to get the washing round before, we all go." And then next time he'd say, "Shall we go for the weekend?" You'd say, I can't face the drive and all that. I'm too tired." And so when we started renting it, we could turn up in the certain knowledge that it would be ready and waiting. And if it was a nice day, we could stay down there till 5 or 6 o'clock with the kids, let them feed them and let them sleep in the car, and just leave everything behind, the linen, even leave the washing up if we wanted, or whatever, and go home. And so that enhanced our enjoyment. But I couldn't justify just having a sort of butler to do that for us. And so the justification was, well, if we do some letting, we can enjoy those services ourselves, and you didn't feel like it was, it was a waste of money.
Yeah. makes sense. So what was the trigger then to go from all of that? You'd created this Cornish empire, and now here we are sat in Sandbanks.
Yes, well, as we expanded, we had to buy some new software, and that put us in touch with a bunch of people. So eventually we started getting approaches from... the industry has got 3 or 4 large players who are very acquisitive and are trying to like map out Britain and compete with each other to hoover up all the holiday lets that's going on. And I happened to be speaking to a guy because he was talking to software as well, and I said, obviously I know you'd be interested in buying the place. I said, but like I haven't got anywhere else to go, and it's what I do. But I said maybe what I'm thinking of doing is setting up something in Poole, compete, because everything seems to be a bit in the doldrums up there from what we're doing here, and it's where I live, and frankly I'd rather live there than here. It's where I've always lived. And he said, well, it's funny you should say that, because we're just in the process of acquiring an agency in Poole. I don't know if you know it, like Rumsey's like thing. And of course, if you come from Poole, Rumsey's is like Harrods or something. They were like a combination of Savills. They were estate agents, surveyors. They actually built much of the infrastructure of Poole. The row of buildings our shop is in was built by Rumsey in the 30s or 40s, and they've been in there ever since. And they sold out. The estate agency was sold out to Black Horse in the first boom in the late 80s, when they deregulated and allowed banks to buy estate agents. But what we think happened is they didn't want the holiday business, so it ended up with a property company owning it in Bristol. My suspicion is they were somehow involved in the deal and said, "Oh, don't worry, we'll look after that." And so for 20 years, it was just here with a manager and a remote management, not their core business. And so I said, "Well, now we're talking. If you want to part X that with the business in Cornwall, then I'd be very interested in having that conversation."
To get a lot of these sliding doors moments going on.
Yes,
you had some bad luck as well, but something.
Yes, I've had my. Well, I think everybody has those. If you go back, and if you went to the party or you didn't, and met your partner or you didn't, or you went to an interview and your car broke on the way, or it can always happen. And so there was this incredible fit. I've been driving past the door of Rumsey's for a decade, thinking, "Oh my word! If only I could get my hands on that, what I could make it," because it was basically nothing had changed for 20 years there. You could, it was run in the traditional way, like the industry was, and it was, and so it was just such a perfect fit. You couldn't make up. They really wanted my business in Cornwall because it was dominant in one place, in which whoever got that, obviously the rest of the big boys would find it difficult to compete to get it. And so that's it all worked. A complicated deal, and I had to spend. It was a 2-year. I had to get the numbers up in Cornwall to a level to get the price that I wanted to put in. But eventually it all came.
2 years, and they were happy to wait while you sorted the numbers out.
Well, that was it. Eventually, as this happens, because once your head has been turned, after about a year in, I said, "Look, everything's on the way. Why don't we just cut a deal? Because I want to get going. I want to get on with it now. My mind is turned elsewhere." So halfway through, everyone was happy, and we shook hands, and I actually owned it from April 17, but I was still working in Cornwall, so it was, and the existing manager was coming up for retirement, so I actually got my feet under the desk in November to run the place in November 17. So,
amazing. How did that feel?
And still to this day, every day when I walk into that shop, and it's the opposite of my name over the door. It's like Rumsey's. I mean, when I told my mother I'm buying Rumsey's, we had this, like, "You're buying Rumsey's?" And her voice got increasingly shrill, and to her it's like like I came home and said I was buying like the Bournemouth Football Club or something, or you know, Debenhams, or you know, like it's you know, the brand, but she's like, yeah, but you're that idiot that didn't study at school, and
the fisherman.
Yes, yeah, no, exactly so. So, and I still to this day feel when I walk in that I've, like I did all those years ago when I remember stepping onto that fishing boat and thinking, now I'm a fisherman. And that was a truly great, you know, moment in my life. And still to this day when I walk in the door, I can't, wow, I'm here. Of course, the reality of what I had to do when I got here was I was blind. I was blind. I was blind. It's a bit like, you know, I'd imagine I've been married since I was 22, 20, so I don't know these things, but I imagine, you know, like 2 weeks in, you notice your new girlfriend's got a wooden leg, you know, which you hadn't noticed before because you were blinded by, you know. Yeah. And yes, it's a bit like that. The concept of running it and driving to work along the peninsula and sitting in the shop with the water on one side, that idea of is still keeping me going every morning.
It's a beautiful part of the world. And the challenge is because it hadn't had much done to it for 20 years, it had a different approach to what you'd been doing.
Yeah.
Is that an understatement?
A slight understatement of the century. So basically nothing had changed for 20 years, and I could go on forever. There's a few things that illustrate. My favourite story I always tell is when I turned up and I went in, and as a sign up, Saturdays, for them, they were traditional. Everyone arrived on a Saturday, 3:00, collect your keys from the shop. And I turned up and there's a sign at the shop that said, closed Saturday, 12 till 3.
Right.
So I said, so why are we closed Saturday? What's that all about? It's closed 12 till 3 on a Saturday. I said, surely we need to, you know, people are coming.
People aren't that punctual.
And they said, no. What happens if you're open? They said, 12 people start ringing and turning up to see if a place is ready early. And they like inundate you and they can't do it. So what we do in order to avoid that, from 12:00, we put the shutters down and we put the phone on answer phone so no one can get hold of us. And that way they can't bother us. And I said, well, does that mean at 3:00 there's like an enormous queue of people that are really upset? I refer you to the first 5-minute lecture. Like in the summer, we've got, you know, 50 parties of people arriving. It's blazing hot. They can't park. They can't get anywhere. And then it must take some time to this. Oh, yeah, it can get really busy on a Saturday, like going in. And I said, just a minute, I'm at the wage bill. Do I pay someone for all day Saturday? They said, oh, yeah, no, you pay her, but she's got to shut the shop and sit in the shop for 3 hours and not answer the phone or go away for 3 hours. It's part of the deal for the Saturday person. So being a marketing genius, I was able to make the immediate
Did you get a consultant in or something?
Yeah, I got some management consultants in. Yeah, no, we went over what
possible way could we improve this?
How could we improve this process, and decided that if we opened, in fact, not only would we check if the properties were ready early, we'd ring people the day before if we could, or at least in the morning, and say, we've managed to get your place ready early, why don't you come
slightly
early?
Yeah.
And you know what? It was easier for us to get the people in. And then I said, well, who does the phone after 5? And they said, what do you mean, we're closed? I said, well, no, who answers the inquiries after 5:00? They said, no, we're closed. I said, well, so what? So what goes to answer phone? And so the lady on Saturday, she doesn't do computers or anything, so she doesn't actually answer it. So I said, if someone rings at 5:15 on Friday, when they get a call back? I said, well, Monday morning. I said, well, don't lots of people work so they can't call in working hours and they need to pay their balances and need to inquire? And they said, well, I don't know, we have a lot of missed calls. People don't usually give a message. So I also implemented an incredible strategy of answering phone when people ring to buy stuff, and it's produced quite an improvement in performance we've found. So it was an open goal.
How are the team responding to your revolutionary changes?
Yes. Now about the revolutionary changes, the team member that remains is fabulous and has responded perfectly to everything. Everybody else has chosen to retire,
Right.
or has left. So I only have one. I mean, it was only 5 people anyway, but yes, I only have one.
Fine, but
one member of the original team.
yeah, and
in there.
you've brought some new people in.
Yes, so I've recruited people that are a little more on my wavelength, as it were. Yeah.
Perfect. So it's clearly still exciting you. You're back in your town. You own your dream company, but there are changes going around, and we touched on this on the sort of journey to this amazing location. But disruption of tech, Airbnb, Booking.com. You referred to them earlier. What's your thoughts on that impact on the industry?
So it's having a big impact with us, and it's a difficult thing to decide what to do. Fortunately, in our market, first of all, because people said the traditional agencies that were booking only have been really hurt by the Airbnb model, because in the end, if you've already organised your own caretaking, your own cleaner, you've got someone to answer the phone, and all your agent does is send you bookings, then it's very easy to sign up for Airbnb, and you've got to answer your own emails, but that's, for many people, that's not too difficult. There's no phone calls allowed because you're not allowed to give your phone number out. It's all done online. That's the expectation. And so they're being badly disrupted. But for us here, it's a bit more like, what have the Romans ever done for us? Because when someone says, oh, you're going to get, what has an agency ever done for me? You're going to get wiped out by Airbnb. And I say, oh, yeah, no. What has an agency ever done for us apart from, answer the phone to customers and answer the emails? Well, okay, apart from answering the phones and the emails, what has an agency ever done for us? Well, we do organise the caretaking and get the houses cleaned. Okay, well, apart from answering the phone, answering the emails, organising the caretaking, organising the cleaning, we're on call 24 hours a day. Okay, so apart from being on, and you could go on, because we're a full service agency, we have owners who live in Singapore, Australia, America. We have city barristers, people who are corporates, and they do not want to be involved at all. They don't want to call on a Saturday to say there's a dishwasher failing, when it's inconceivable. And so for us, it's much less of a threat on that caretaking side.
Do you think it's adding to the supply because the publicity of people realising that they can generate a revenue from their properties? Do you think a lot more people are now buying holiday homes or putting their homes up to rent?
Well, most certainly. So it's just like Uber and taxis, it's created, there's no doubt whatsoever that it's creating additional volume in the market of people coming to stay in. See, when I say self-catering, to me, self-catering means sort of Butlins or, a caravan site. But people use a universal road for not being in a hotel. And so people who would never consider staying somewhere that wasn't a hotel are being introduced to it. And it's undoubtedly increasing the supply side for shorter breaks. And it's increasing the demand with us, but also it's become a platform where people go first because it's got everything, or that's the perception. And so they bring us business we wouldn't otherwise have. I should say we do list on the platform. But at the same time, they're venture funded, they pay, the industry feels they're buying pay-per-click ads, for instance, at a rate that is not really economic in order to grow. And so they're almost funneling business that we would otherwise have got through their site because they're outbidding us or on a rate that isn't economically viable, on just like restaurant chains that can afford to open and lose money for a couple of 3 years. It's that part of the business, and at the moment it's quite reasonable for us to use them. But my feeling is, I'm very cautious about letting it become too much of our business because the squeeze is coming at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. In the same way that Deliveroo are learning what sort of food people order and what time they order it, and what's popular, and therefore building their own kitchens, you have to wonder what comes next. Have you given any thought, because we're a tourism town historically, Bournemouth, Poole, Christchurch. We've got hundreds and hundreds of hotels. We've got a number of restaurants. We have this huge flood of people come down in the summer. It's happened in Barcelona and Venice and places where Airbnb and this kind of rental income sector has become so big that it's made it impossible for the locals to live there. How's the impact, I suppose, one, on the town, and two, on sandbanks? Is it becoming more of an issue where more and more properties are therefore going to rental? And do you get any kind of feedback or thoughts on how people still live in those areas?
Well, this is literally an island almost, and Sandbanks itself and the bit we work in is very different to even probably Bournemouth or Poole. And in Cornwall, we saw that in a big way with people buying up houses. Here, the Sandbanks Peninsula has been dominated with second homes anyway, and it's not. If your aim is just to make some money, you wouldn't be buying a property on Sandbanks, because the returns, you'd buy 10 apartments in central Bournemouth and turn them over, and that would be the way to get margin out of them. And that's where we may see an impact, just like with the student accommodation. We're not seeing that feedback here at all. A little bit from a hint from retired people who perhaps perceive, there was a lot of publicity a few years ago about stag parties, living it up. The papers got onto it in posh areas, which was like rarely happens. It's not part of the culture here. It's not part of the business, but it's good headline. Posh people in Sandbanks have butlers in the above next door, but we really haven't seen that issue here. What I'm concerned about is that once we get, the more reliant we are on them to bring our business, one day, particularly, Airbnb is still a private company that's growing. If they get acquired or if they IPO, they'll have a fiduciary duty to deliver maximum revenues to their shareholders, and that's got to mean squeezing the owners. So,
and the regulation that we're getting in London, where they're now Airbnb operators are limited to 90 days a year, that's presumably good news for you, is it? Because if they come through you, they don't get that regulation. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think my understanding of those rules is it would apply to us if they brought it in here, because I don't think they discriminate against Airbnb. So they could bring in a regulation that said you were only allowed to do 90 days holiday letting. That would be a stratospherically huge sliding doors moment will wipe out, because the massive motivation for many people who've got a second home to let out is that they have to let a certain number of weeks to qualify as a business and as a holiday letting business, which brings them the opportunity to treat it as a business, offset expenses, again, not against their other income, but it means their income is, they can offset anything they spend on profit from the company. They can write stuff down, and crucially, they get entrepreneurs relief out in capital gains. So they get out, if they sell the place, they get out a 10% capital gain instead of 28, and that is why many places are not locked up. But what would happen here is those places wouldn't come on the market for ordinary boys and girls to buy flat in Sandbanks to live in. They'd merely be, if they didn't have those benefits, then they'd be locked up and no one would come. For in 99% of the cases, I'm confident.
Really? Which then has an impact on the restaurants.
Yes, because
we're also seeing this is very Bournemouth specific, although I wouldn't be surprised if it's happening across every university, city and town in the country, but we're seeing these massive properties built for student lets, and students don't seem to live in the same way they did when I'm sure you and I were there, where it was pretty crappy accommodation. They now seem to have these beautiful blocks and communal areas and all these new builds. And then I'm being told that a lot of those are now being released in the summer, so the students disappear for the summer and they're being released for rentals. Have you spotted that? Is it true, and is it having an impact?
I haven't seen it because I've been blinkered in doing stuff here, and in fact, when I first arrived, I thought I'm going to take over. I'm going to create a brand in Bournemouth, a brand in Poole, and having got here, it's a balance of there's so much to do right here on the peninsula that I actually have decided no, for the foreseeable future, we're not going to Bournemouth, and I actually fend off inquiries from Bournemouth. So I haven't been involved in it. Getting off subject or whatever, I think, unsurprisingly, and my sons have just been through university, and the whole thing is starting to look like a bit of a money-making business where people are encouraged to go to university, which means they need accommodation, and the whole thing about offering people places without the need to actually get any grades, unconditional offers, but in order to persuade them to come to their place, because it's become a numbers game, the more students you can attract. And it may be blasphemous, but you've got to ask yourself if the 50 grand of debt is worth the 2-2 in history of art or
fishing
or whatever degree that you come out with. And you've got to ask yourself, if you took the 50 grand and started a business, or if you spent 3 years working for nothing in somewhere that really knew what they were doing, would you be better off? And I think that it's seeing all those blocks going up in Bournemouth every time you drive past, which is fueling. They're going to have to fill them, and to fill them, they're going to have to fill the places, and to get the place, they're going to have to compete with the other universities, and that's going to mean offering places to people for whom are perhaps less suited. But that's not. It used to be that a university, interviewed people and got those to study that they thought was suitable for them, and I don't think that is the case. I
think the key thing, and it's the same teacher speaking to anybody in any particular sector, and I'm sure not just in hospitality, but it's those speed of change and the curveballs that you don't notice. We've got a little hotel, and as the university adds hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rooms into the mix every summer, and then clearly supply and demand. If they go on supply for July and August when the students aren't around, that it's got to have an impact on price. But I think the key with all of this is that you've just got to constantly keep learning. There's no point whinging about the changes that are coming. The tech revolutions come in, it's easier for the customer. Regulation tries to catch up. So Airbnb, particularly, like I say, in places like Venice and Barcelona, they're really trying to work fast to work out, how does the centre of Venice not just become a tourism town? So it's got its challenges, but it's interesting. You mentioned, Rumsey's been around for a very long time. Will it still be around in 50 years?
Absolutely. I'm certain it will be, because of the location. Location that we are here, whether the business will change, we don't. I used to say, when I've asked people about, because they ask about what will the tax rules be on pensions in 30 years' time, and I'd say, well, I can't tell you, but I can tell you they won't be the same as they are today. I can't see how the business would change in that people are going to want to come on holiday to Sandbanks, and if anything, you would think in our glorious future, the 20-hour work week and all that we're heading for, and which doesn't seem to have arrived.
No,
but leisure is certainly becoming. You see, I read something recently about the next generation are much more interested in experiences than they are in physical things, so they're much more likely to go to spend a lot of money on travelling than they are a fancy car or a new front door. So it's or even owning a property, and there's another whole rabbit hole to go down. I absolutely believe that it will be here in 50 years and thriving. And who knows what format? Maybe we'll have built blocks of accommodation that's specific for
Yeah,
what
maybe.
people want. And maybe we'll own properties, because we don't own any properties at all at the moment. It's a sort of religious part that we're an agent, not an operator, so there's no conflict.
Okay. Yeah.
So we'll see.
Okay, so no more crashes of 2008. Hopefully, congratulations for what you've achieved. The journey's fascinating. You seem in a very happy place now, in a happy part of the world, with a business that you love, and with all of that knowledge and your the sort of sales background that you've got. You're clearly good at it. Where can people go to follow the adventure and follow the journey and find out more?
Well, to come and find out, you can go to rumseyofsandbanks.co.uk. And you can see all the properties that we have. And if anyone wants to email simon@rumseyofsandbanks.co.uk, I'm always happy to chat along or join in anything. And if anybody wants to offer something to our guests, we'd love to send our guests to, in fact, I'm thinking of having the Humans of Hospitality guide to hand out to everyone they come, to tell them which beer to drink, which chocolate to eat, and which whose cakes to buy, as it were. Because we see, I think that would be a great little thing.
That'd be good. And I was going to add that if they can't find you at the office, they might find you in a couple of local bars. So often found having a beer on a stall in Jenkins and Sons, they'll track you down.
Yes, that's right. Always a good chance you'll see me there.
Perfect. Simon, thanks so much for spending the time. Good luck in your next adventure in your business.
Thanks, Mark. It was a pleasure to be.
So there you have it. You have reached the end of another episode of the Humans of Hospitality podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Please go and visit our website, humansofhospitality.co.uk, for the show notes and extra episodes and information. And whilst you're there, don't forget to sign up for our newsletter and to receive free materials all about the humans behind our incredible industry. Lastly, if you could subscribe, rate and review this podcast, you will be massively helping me out, and it would be hugely appreciated. Thank you so much. We'll be launching another podcast in just 7 days' time. Cheers.